Welcome to African Folktales by D. Elenas. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us in the comments where you're joining us from. Don't forget to turn on notifications so every story comes straight to you. That evening started like any other evening in the compound. Children laughed. Pots boiled, smoke rose gently into the sky. Parents felt relieved because, for once, nobody would sleep hungry. It was one of those rare moments when food came easily and worrying rested quietly. But hunger has a way of making people careless. No one asked what was cooking. No one asked where it came from. No one imagined that a simple meal could carry a secret heavy enough to change lives forever. The children ate happily at first, bowls scraped clean. Smiles filled the air, and for a brief moment, everything felt right. Then the crying started. One child complained of pain. Then another. Then fear moved faster than any adult could stop it. By nightfall, laughter had vanished. Mothers clutched their children tightly. Fathers searched for answers that came too late. And in the middle of the chaos stood one woman, shaking, realizing that good intentions are not always safe. Years later, people would still lower their voices when talking about that evening. Because the truth was painful. If only they knew what the children ate that evening, they would have asked questions before hunger silenced wisdom. And some lessons, once learned, never leave a community the same again. Let's begin the story. December. Evenings in Oruama compound always carried a strange mix of hunger and hope. The sun would sink slowly behind the palm trees, and smoke from cooking fires would curl into the sky like tired prayers. On this particular evening, the compound felt unusually busy. Women moved in and out of kitchens, children laughed loudly, and men sat in small groups discussing money, food, and the new year coming soon. Mama Kelechi stood beside her small cooking shed, stirring a large pot with careful hands. Her face looked calm, but her eyes kept drifting toward the children playing nearby. They were louder than usual, running barefoot on dusty ground, unaware that the night would not end the way they expected. Food was always a sensitive topic in Oruama. Many families survived day by day, and any shared meal was treated like a blessing. That evening, Mama Kelechi had announced she would prepare food for the children in the compound. The news had spread quickly, and parents were relieved. No one asked too many questions. Relief often silences curiosity. As the pot boiled, a strange smell rose into the air. Not bad, just unfamiliar. Mama Kelechi adjusted the firewood and whispered something under her breath. Nearby, old Papanwoy watched from his seat, his eyes narrowing slightly. He felt something was wrong but said nothing. When children started lining up with bowls in their hands, laughter filled the compound. No one noticed the way Mama Kelechi's hands trembled as she served the food. Earlier that morning, the compound had woken up to the sound of coughing goats and crying babies. Life continued as usual, even when worrying sat quietly in people's hearts. Mama Kelechi had barely slept the night before. She lay awake listening to the sound of rats in the ceiling and her own thoughts racing without rest. Her husband, Okori, had lost his job months ago. Since then, hunger had become a regular visitor in their home. They argued less now, not because things were better, but because they were too tired to fight. That morning, Okori had stared at the empty food shelf and sighed deeply. "We can't continue like this," he said softly. Mama Kelechi said nothing. She already knew. Later that day, she visited the old storage hut behind the compound. It was a place people avoided, filled with forgotten items and memories nobody wanted. Inside, she found a sack she did not remember owning. It was heavy and sealed tightly. When she opened it, she froze. The contents looked like dried grains, but they were not grains she recognized. She hesitated, then told herself hunger had no time for fear. She remembered something her grandmother once said: when people are desperate, they stop asking where help comes from. By afternoon, she had made a decision, a dangerous one. Children have a way of trusting adults without question. That evening, they gathered quickly when Mama Kelechi called. Bowls clanged together as excitement spread. Some children had not eaten properly all day, and the promise of food was stronger than any warning. Little Kiamaka held her bowl with both hands. She was the youngest in the group and always stayed close to her brother, Sola. Her eyes were wide with happiness as she whispered, "It smells different." Sola shrugged. Food is food. Parents watched from a distance, satisfied. In Oruama, shared meals meant unity. Nobody wanted to be the one to spoil the moment with suspicion. Popenwoy stood up slowly from his chair. He had lived long enough to know that strange seasons bring strange choices. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. What proof did he have? Hunger had already won. Mama Kelechi served each child carefully, avoiding their eyes. Sweat formed on her forehead, even though the evening breeze was cool. When the last bowl was filled, she stepped back and watched them eat. Laughter continued at first. Children joked and teased one another. But slowly, the noise reduced. One by one, bowls were set down unfinished. Kiamaka frowned. "My stomach feels funny," she said quietly. Mama Kelechi's heart skipped. The first cry came from a boy named Emeka. He clutched his stomach and began to wail loudly. At first, adults thought he was being dramatic. Children cry for many reasons, but then another child began to complain. Then another. Parents stood up, confusion spreading like smoke. Mama Kelechi's ears rang as voices rose around her. "What is happening? Why are they crying?" Kiamaka suddenly vomited onto the ground. Panic exploded. Mothers rushed forward, lifting children, shouting names, asking questions nobody could answer. Popenwoy pushed through the crowd and knelt beside one of the children. His face tightened as he observed them carefully. "This is not ordinary food reaction," he said quietly. Mama Kelechi stepped back slowly, her legs shaking. She wanted to speak, to explain, but words refused to form. The weight of her decision pressed down on her chest. Men ran to fetch water. Someone suggested palm oil. Another shouted that they should take the children to the clinic. The compound that had been filled with laughter minutes earlier was now drowning in fear. As parents carried their children away, Mama Kelechi collapsed onto a wooden stool. Her hands were cold. She whispered, "I just wanted them to eat, but hunger does not excuse consequences." Night fell quickly, as if the sky itself wanted to hide. Some children were taken to the small clinic nearby, while others were laid on mats inside homes. The air buzzed with fear and unanswered questions. At the clinic, the nurse frowned as she checked the children. "What did they eat?" she asked. Parents exchanged confused looks. No one knew exactly. They only knew Mama Kelechi had cooked. Words spread fast in Oruama. Whispers traveled faster than truth. By midnight, everyone was talking. Mama Kelechi sat alone in her room, rocking back and forth. Okori stood at the doorway, his face pale. "What did you cook?" he asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears ran down her face. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought it was food." Okori's knees weakened. He remembered the strange sack he had seen earlier and said nothing about. Outside, Popenwoy stared at the stars. He remembered stories from his childhood, stories of shortcuts that ended badly. He sighed deeply. That night, Oruama did not sleep. Morning arrived quietly, as if afraid to make noise. The children who had been taken to the clinic were still weak. Some slept restlessly. Others stared blankly at the ceiling. The nurse called for help from a bigger hospital in town. Doctors arrived later in the day and began asking serious questions. What exactly was in the food? One doctor asked firmly. Silence followed. Mama Kelechi was finally called forward. She shook uncontrollably as she described the sack, the grains, and her desperation. Every word felt like a stone falling into still water. The doctors exchanged looks. "This substance is not food," one said. "It was never meant to be eaten." A heavy silence filled the room. Parents cried openly now. Some shouted. Others stared at Mama Kelechi with eyes full of pain and disbelief. She covered her face, wishing she could disappear. "I just wanted to help," she sobbed. Popenwoy spoke calmly. "Good intentions do not cancel bad actions." The truth settled into the compound like thick dust. Nobody slept that night either. Days passed slowly. The children recovered, but not without scars. Some lost weight. Others became quiet, no longer running freely. Mama Kelechi stopped leaving her house. Even water fetching felt heavy. When she stepped outside, conversation stopped. Eyes followed her. Okori tried to defend her, but his voice was weak against the weight of what had happened. One evening, Popenwoy visited her. He sat quietly before speaking. "Hunger pushed you," he said, but silence finished the work. She nodded, tears dripping onto her wrapper. "If only I had asked," she whispered. Popenwoy sighed. If only they knew what the children ate that evening, before it was too late. The lesson settled deep into the compound. By the third morning, the compound felt like a place that had lost its voice. Doors opened and closed gently. People spoke in whispers, as if loud sounds might wake something painful. The children were alive, but they were not the same. They moved slowly, ate carefully, and watched adults with new seriousness in their eyes. Kiamaka sat on a mat beside her mother, tracing lines in the dust. She did not ask for food. She did not ask for anything. Her mother noticed and felt a sharp pain in her chest. Parents gathered in small groups, replaying the evening again and again. Everyone remembered the smell of the food, the laughter, the silence that followed. And the moment fear took over. Mama Kelechi remained indoors. She washed plates that were already clean and folded clothes that did not need folding. Her mind refused to rest. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw bowls in children's hands. Papanwoy walked around the compound slowly, greeting people without smiling. He stopped near the old storage hut and stared at it for a long time. Some things, he knew, should never be touched just because they were available. That morning, fear did not shout. It sat quietly, reminding everyone that danger sometimes wears a friendly facade. Village elders called for a meeting before sunset. Word spread quickly, and by evening, people gathered under the big mango tree. No drums were beaten. No greetings were exchanged. Faces were tight with emotion. Mama Kelechi arrived last. She walked slowly, her head bowed. Okori followed behind her, his shoulders heavy. The crowd parted slightly, creating space that felt colder than rejection. An elder cleared his throat. "We are not here to shout," he said. "We are here to understand." Mama Kelechi lifted her head and spoke with a trembling voice. She explained everything again. The hunger, the sack, the decision she thought was right at the time. Each word fell into the silence like a stone. Some parents cried openly. Others looked away. One father stood up, his fists tight, then slowly sat back down. Anger had no direction anymore. Papanwoy spoke last. "This did not happen because of one person alone," he said. "It happened because nobody asked questions." That truth landed hard. The meeting ended without punishment, but not without consequence. Trust had cracked, and rebuilding it would take time. That night, Mama Kelechi could not sleep. She lay on her mat, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the compound. Somewhere, a baby cried. Somewhere else, a man coughed. Life continued. Even when guilt tried to stop it, she remembered her own childhood, how her mother never served food without explaining where it came from. How questions were welcomed, not feared. She wondered when survival had become more important than wisdom. Okori sat beside her quietly. "We will carry this for a long time," he said. She nodded. "I know." Outside, mothers checked on their children repeatedly, touching foreheads, listening to breathing. Fear had taught them a new habit. Kiamaka woke up crying that night from a bad dream. Her mother held her tightly and whispered, "You are safe now." But even she was not sure if it was true. The compound learned something important that night. Danger does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives in a bowl, served with good intentions. Following days brought visitors. Relatives came to check on the children. Some brought fruits. Others brought quiet judgment. Each visit reopened the wound. The children slowly regained strength, but their parents watched them closely, afraid of laughter that came too easily. Food was now served carefully. Ingredients were checked. Questions were asked. Mama Kelechi began helping clean the compound early every morning. She did not speak unless spoken to. It was her way of showing regret. One afternoon, Kiamaka walked up to her and looked up quietly. "Auntie," she said, "my stomach doesn't hurt anymore." Mama Kelechi swallowed hard. "Thank God," she replied. Kiamaka nodded and walked away. That small moment broke something inside her. She realized forgiveness might come, but forgetting never would. Papanwoy watched the interaction from a distance. He sighed. "Lessons that come through children are the heaviest," he said to no one in particular. By the second week, the compound began to breathe again. Laughter returned slowly, carefully, like a visitor who was unsure if they were welcome. Children played, but closer to home. Parents watched from doorways. A new rule formed without being spoken. No shared food without explanation. No silence when something felt wrong. Mama Kelechi stood before the compound one evening and apologized again, this time without tears. Her voice was steady. "I failed you," she said. "I failed the children." Nobody clapped. Nobody shouted. But nobody walked away either. That alone meant something. Papanwoy nodded slowly. We move forward by remembering, he said. The compound agreed. The third week after the incident, the compound no longer felt like the same place. It still had houses, paths, and trees, but something invisible had shifted. People walked differently now, slowly, carefully, as if the ground itself could betray them if they were careless. The children had returned to playing, but their games were quieter. They no longer shouted without reason. They paused often to look at adults, as though waiting for permission before trusting joy again. Kiamaka sat under the mango tree that afternoon, drawing shapes in the sand with a stick. Her mother watched her closely from the doorway. Every small movement made her heart jump. She remembered the night Kiamaka cried and held her stomach, how helpless she had felt. That memory refused to leave. Across the compound, Mama Kelechi swept the ground. The broom scratched against the earth in slow, steady movements. She did this every morning and evening now. It was not because the ground was dirty. It was because keeping her hands busy kept her thoughts from tearing her apart. People passed her without greeting. Not out of hatred, but out of confusion. They did not know what to say. Some still felt angry. Others felt guilty for not asking questions that night. And some felt both at once. Papanwoy sat outside his house, watching everything. He had lived long enough to know that when silence follows noise, change is coming. First real change happened quietly. One evening, a woman named Amina knocked on Mama Kelechi's door. She stood awkwardly, holding a small bowl of rice. "I cooked too much," she said, avoiding eye contact. "I thought maybe you and your husband could eat." Mama Kelechi froze. Her heart raced. For weeks, nobody had offered her food. Food had become a dangerous language in the compound. She hesitated, then accepted the bowl with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Amina nodded and left without another word. That night, Mama Kelechi cried for a long time. Not because of hunger, but because that small act felt like a bridge. Weak, but real. The next day, two children greeted her. Just a soft good morning. It felt heavier than forgiveness. Parents began talking more openly among themselves. "Why didn't we ask?" one mother said. "Why did we trust hunger more than sense?" No one answered, because the answer was uncomfortable. Hunger had made them impatient. Trust had made them careless. Papanwoy gathered the men one evening. "If we pretend nothing happened," he said, "it will happen again." Nobody argued. That night, doors stayed open longer. Conversations lasted deeper into the evening. The compound had started learning how to speak again. A meeting was called again, but this one felt different. There was no anger in the air, only seriousness. Parents sat with their children beside them. No one wanted distance anymore. Mama Kelechi stood up before she was asked to. Her voice shook at first, but she forced herself to continue. "I will carry this mistake all my life," she said. "But I don't want it to be useless. I want it to teach something." She explained again how desperation had closed her eyes. How she had chosen speed over safety. How silence had seemed easier than questions. "I thought feeding the children was enough," she said softly. "I forgot that what we feed them matters." A father stood up. "We trusted without checking," he said. "We share that blame." That moment changed everything. For the first time, responsibility was shared. Not to reduce guilt, but to increase wisdom. They agreed on simple rules. Any shared food must be explained. Any strange source must be questioned. Anyone unsure must speak. It was not written down. It did not need to be. Fear had carved it deep enough. As the meeting ended, children held their parents' hands tightly. Adults noticed and did not pull away. Weeks passed. The harm slowly loosened its grip, but it never fully left. It stayed like a scar, quiet, but visible to those who knew where to look. Mama Kelechi began visiting homes to apologize personally. Some people welcomed her. Some did not. She accepted both reactions without complaint. One afternoon, she visited Kiamaka's home. Kiamaka's mother opened the door and stared at her for a long moment. "I don't hate you," she finally said. "But I'm still afraid." Mama Kelechi nodded. "So am I." That honesty soft and something between them. Inside, Kiamaka played quietly. She looked up when Mama Kelechi entered. "You cooked that food?" Kiamaka said simply. Mama Kelechi knelt. "Yes, will you do it again?" "No," she said immediately. "Never." Kiamaka studied her face, then nodded once and returned to her toy. That was all. Outside, Mama Kelechi breathed deeply. Forgiveness, she realized, did not always come with words. Sometimes it came with permission to stay. As months passed, the compound slowly returned to rhythm. Markets opened. Laughter grew louder. Life insisted on moving forward, but habits had changed. Parents tasted food before giving it to children. They asked questions openly. Children learned to say, "Who cooked this?" without fear. One day, a traveler offered free snacks to the children. Parents stopped them immediately. "What is inside?" they asked. The traveler laughed nervously. "Just something small." Then explain, a mother said firmly. The traveler left. That moment spread through the compound like quiet pride. They had learned. Mama Kelechi watched from a distance. Her chest tightened with mixed feelings: pain, relief, gratitude. She started helping women cook safely, teaching them what she had learned the hard way. No one announced it. It just happened. Pain had become purpose. Another December came quietly. Pots boiled again, but eyes stayed open. No one rushed. No one assumed. Children waited patiently as food was explained. Parents nodded. Questions were answered. Kiamaka laughed loudly that evening, chasing fireflies. Her laughter sounded stronger than before, as if it had survived something. Mama Kelechi stood by her doorway, watching. Okori stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "We almost lost everything," he said. "We almost lost more than food," she replied. Fireworks cracked in the distance. The year changed. This time, nobody believed time alone fixed things. Years passed. Some families moved away. New ones arrived. But the story stayed. It was not told loudly. It did not need drama. It lived in caution, in questions, in pauses before action. Children who grew up hearing it became adults who remembered. One young mother once said, "In this compound, we ask questions." And that became its identity. Papa Nwoy grew older, slower, but content. "Mistakes that teach are painful," he said one evening. "But mistakes that repeat are deadly." Mama Kelechi listened from nearby, nodding. Years had passed, but the memory of that evening still lived quietly in Orwama compound. It did not shout anymore. It did not cry. It simply stayed, like a shadow that appeared only when the light changed. Children who had once eaten from those bowls were now taller. Some had deeper voices. Some had learned how to cook simple meals for themselves. Life had moved forward, but it carried its lessons carefully, like fragile glass. Mama Kelechi had changed too. Her hair showed thin lines of gray now, though she was not very old. People said she aged early, but she never corrected them. She knew why. Guilt has a way of pressing years into a short time. One afternoon, a young woman named Zainab came to visit her. Zainab had recently married and moved into the compound. She was curious, polite, and careful with words. They sat together under the mango tree, shelling groundnuts. For a long time, they worked in silence. Finally, Zainab asked softly, "Auntie Kelechi, how do you live with it?" Mama Kelechi did not ask what she meant. She knew. She paused, then said, "At first, I thought I would die from it. The shame, the fear, the memories." Zainab listened closely. "But later," Mama Kelechi continued, "I understood something. Pain does not leave because you want it to. It stays until it has taught you." She looked at her hands. "I live with it by remembering. I use it to protect others. I use it to speak when silence feels easier." Zainab nodded slowly. "I've noticed people here ask many questions." Mama Kelechi gave a small smile. "Yes, because questions keep children alive." That evening, Zainab cooked her first meal in the compound. Before serving it, she explained every ingredient carefully. No one laughed. They listened. Papa and Woye died quietly one early morning during the rainy season. There was no warning. No sickness that anyone noticed. He simply lay down the night before and did not wake up. The compound woke to a different kind of silence that day. Papa Nwoy had been more than an old man. He was a voice, a reminder, a walking memory of what happens when people forget too easily. His funeral was attended by people from nearby villages. Many came not because they knew him closely, but because they had heard his stories. Stories that saved children. Stories that slowed people down. At the burial, a man stood up and said, "Papa Nwoy taught us that wisdom is not loud. It waits for listening ears." Mama Kelechi stood at the back, holding her wrapper tightly. Tears ran freely down her face. Papa Nwoy had never blamed her openly, but he had never allowed the truth to hide either. After the burial, people gathered and talked quietly. One woman said, "If Papa Nwoy were still alive, he would remind us again." Mama Kelechi spoke without thinking. Then we must remind ourselves that sentence stayed. From that day on, whenever food was shared, someone would ask, "Have we remembered?" And everyone understood what it meant. Papanwoy was gone, but his voice had multiplied. One night, during a heavy rainstorm, the power went out across the compound. Darkness covered everything, broken only by lightning flashes. Children gathered inside homes. Mothers told stories to calm them. Rain drummed hard on rooftops. In Mama Kelechi's house, Kiamaka sat close to her mother, now almost a teenager. "Mummy," Kiamaka asked quietly, "why do people still talk about that food?" Her mother sighed. "Because forgetting is dangerous." "But it didn't happen again," Kiamaka said. "That is because we remember," her mother replied. Kiamaka thought about it for a moment. "So the story is like a guard." "Yes," her mother smiled. "A guard that never sleeps." Across the compound, Zainab told her own child a gentler version of the story. Not to scare, but to teach. The rain continued through the night. Mama Kelechi lay awake, listening. She remembered that evening again, the laughter, the bowls, the sudden crying. She whispered into the darkness, "I will never stop remembering." Outside, thunder rolled, but inside her chest, something felt steady. Another generation grew up in Oruama compound. Some children left for school far away. Some returned during holidays. Whenever they came back, they noticed the same thing. People asked questions. A boy once joked, "Why do adults here behave like food is dangerous?" An older cousin replied, "Because food can be dangerous when nobody talks." The lesson had become part of the air. Mama Kelechi grew older, but lighter. Not because the past disappeared, but because she no longer carried it alone. One evening, she stood watching children eat together. Their bowls were filled with simple food. Nothing fancy. Nothing rushed. She smiled. Okori stood beside her. "You turned pain into protection," he said. She shook her head. "We did. All of us." As the sun set, laughter floated gently through the compound. It sounded earned. Years later, long after Mama Kelechi's hair had turned fully gray, a visitor came to Oruama compound and asked a simple question: "Why do people here take food so seriously?" An old woman replied calmly, "Because once, we almost lost our children." The visitor asked for the story. They told it slowly, carefully, without drama. And when they finished, the visitor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "If only they knew what the children ate that evening." "Yes," the old woman replied. "If only." The sentence did not hurt anymore. It protected, because hunger is powerful. But silence is deadlier. And the most dangerous mistake is not asking questions when something matters. In Oruama compound, they learned that lesson once, and they never let it go.